Hey guys, okay, so first off, to anyone who clicked on this video fully expecting to see Magnus Carlsen actually sitting down across the board from Jesus Christ of Nazareth to play a game of chess, I do apologize. However, the way that this game turned out, he may as well have been playing a divine being because I really don't think it would have ended any more quickly or more spectacularly than this had he been facing an opponent of infinite strength. So buckle up, this game is fantastic, and even if you've seen it already, stick around because I'm going to show you some incredible variations that you won't see anywhere else. And as many of you have probably surmised, the person actually responsible for creating this mini masterpiece is none other than the Hungarian Super Grandmaster and 25th best player in the world, Richard Rapport, who in my defense does have a pretty strong Jesus vibe going on. But enough with the silliness. Let's delve into this very serious game from round 4 of this year's FIDE Rapid and Blitz Team Championship. Magnus Carlsen is playing white and he kicks things off with e4. We have c6 from Richard Rapport, the Caro-Kann. Not really what I like to play, I'm a Sicilian man myself. And here, Magnus Carlsen chooses to exchange pawns on d5. I've had pretty good luck with e5 right here, that's what I like to play. And I think it's the strongest move, but what do I know? Both moves are extremely popular. Now we get bishop to d3 from Carlsen, playing against Richard Rapport's light squared bishop. He doesn't want it to go to f5, and he didn't play knight f3 here because he doesn't want it to go to g4. He's hoping e6 will come and block the light squared bishop before it can get outside the pawn chain. Standard stuff. We got knight to f6, h3 again, doesn't want bishop g4, and he's ready to play knight f3. Knight to c6 now eyeing d4, c3 defense. e5 now from Richard Rapport, a very interesting decision. Magnus, of course, takes the pawn, gives him the isolated pawn on d5, but what does he get in exchange? He gets the very active knight on e5, hitting the bishop. He's got both diagonals open for his bishops. Both kings are uncastled, so this is going to get real interesting real quick. And you think Magnus retreats his bishop? No, he counterattacks. He says, I'm going to play queen to e2, pin your knight. Richard Rapport blocks that pin with knight to e4. A very sneaky idea. Many of you might be wanting to capture the knight on e4, win that pawn on e4. Black can simply play bishop to d6 and not even worry about the fact that this knight is pinned. Because if you try to win that knight as white, you're going to run into some problems. Let's say you play f4 here. Well, here comes queen to h4 check. What are you doing with that king? Let's look at king to f1. Black can simply castle. You're not taking the knight because this f-pawn is pinned. You will lose your queen. So what happens if you try to kick the black queen around? g3 maybe? Just go queen to f6. Now this pawn's pinned in a different way, against the king. White is way down in development. King is uncastled. He's not going to win this knight. Whether he saw these lines or not, I don't know. He just instinctively knew that you don't want to try to win that pawn there, so he played bishop to b5 check. The check is blocked, and now he just develops with knight to f3, hitting this knight on e5. And what do you think black should do here? Richard Rapport makes a good decision. He just drops the knight back. If you were to take on f3, now you do have a problem as black, because after g takes f3, this knight will be won. There is no queen to h4 with check, and if you take the bishop like this, the queen recaptures with check, you're still losing your knight, like so. If instead you were to try to defend the knight on e5 with bishop to d6, we're going to take on d7, queen takes, and then play f3. There's no queen to h4 check. There is a bishop to g3 check, but here, king to d1 is just fine. And in this line, black, despite his much better development and the fact that he can castle right here, he's not winning. You can take on e4, pawn's recaptured with check. You can slide the king over to c2. Rook to d1 is coming. Black just doesn't have it here. So, moving the knight back was a good decision in this position when knight to g6 was played. Bishop to e3 from Carlsen. We have some developing moves here. Knight b to d2, castles. Now we have the bishop exchange on d7, queen takes d7, okay. And at this point, Magnus does a thing that we tell beginners not to do, and that is leaves his king in the center longer than he needs to. Castling long is a good move here. Castling short is a good move, but Carlsen plays rook to d1. Why exactly, I don't know. I don't think it's a mouse slip, but this is where he starts to get into some trouble. We have rook f to e8, setting up a nasty threat involving the move knight to f4. Now if Carlsen were to just try to castle, knight to f4 comes. Now if you take that knight, there's the discovered attack with the rook, with knight takes c3. Queen's got to go somewhere, and then knight to e2 check is a fork. You get your piece back. Black is winning. So You don't want to take the knight on f4. If you just move the queen, then there's the sack on h3, like so. Rook to e6 is coming. You're in big trouble. So Magnus, smelling the danger here, knew he needed to do something, and he took out the knight on e4. It's recaptured with the rook. Again, he should just castle. And here, if knight to f4, you can play queen to d2. And if knight takes h3 check, you don't capture the knight. You just slide your king over to h1. The engine is saying this is equal, and it's giving the line knight to f4, and now you can remove the knight, and then you can take the pawn here on d5. The material has equalized, and apparently black has nothing. But that is a scary line to allow. The fact that black can even get away with knight takes h3 and it's not losing. I typically don't like to allow those sacrifices around my king unless I know that they're winning for me. So I can understand why Magnus didn't want to go down this line, but he really needed to castle. Even queen to d2 would have been good here. Instead, Magnus begins to really stray from the straight and narrow with this move knight to g5. Leaving his king in the center, but hitting this rook, which Richard Rapport ignores. He drops the knight into f4. It comes with an attack on the queen, so you don't have time to take out that rook. The idea here with this move knight to g5, besides attacking the rook, is that the queen now gets f3. Seems reasonable. You're defending the h3 point, so you're not going to worry about any knight takes h3 sacrifices. But now we get queen to b5, focusing on the other side of the board, hitting this b2 pawn. Magnus plays g3, giving this knight a kick, and we have the strongest move from Richard Rapport, f6, counterattack. And here, white really only has one good defensive try, and that is a move that you probably won't find. Even if you study this position for 100 years, you might not find white's best move here. You ready for it? If you want to pause the video and have a look, go ahead. But I'm going to show you now, that move is a4. What does that do? Well, it attacks the black queen, obviously, sacrifices a pawn, but it's really important that this queen cannot attack both the f1 square and the e8 square. So you got to drive this queen from one of those two diagonals, and I'm going to show you two variations that demonstrate this. The first variation involves the blunder knight takes e4. If Magnus were to play that move now, which he didn't, there would be d takes e4, hitting his queen. Now if you take the pawn here, that's mate in one. You can't do that. So you got to stay on this diagonal. The only place you can go is g4, but this runs into a checkmate in two with knight to g2 check. And if the king could move to f1 here, white would be fine. That's why you don't want the queen controlling that square. In this case, the king has to go to d2, after which queen takes b2 is checkmate. So that, my friends, is why you do not want the queen controlling f1, one of the reasons for playing a4. Now let's look at the line that demonstrates why you don't want the queen controlling the e8 square. And that comes after the variation that was played in the game, which is to take the knight on f4. Richard Rapport takes out the knight on g5. We have f takes g5, and now rook to f8, forcing Magnus to move to g2, which is what he does. As white, you would love to play to e2, challenge this queen's position here, but with this queen on b5 still, this runs into rook takes e3. You can't take with the pawn, or else there's going to be bishop to g3 check, king goes to d2, and then rook to f2. The queen is lost. So you have to take with the queen instead. Queen takes e3, but here comes rook to e8, pinning the queen to the king, a move that would not be possible if this queen was not controlling that e8 square. A variation which completes our understanding of why a4, a few moves ago, was the best move. But let's get back to the game. In this position, queen e2 is not working, so Magnus is forced to play queen to g2. And does Richard Rapport take on b2 and allow Carlsen to castle? No. He increases the pressure with rook f to e8 with the very nasty threat of taking on e3 like so, taking with the rook. You can see that the rook sacrifice is going to lead to a big disaster here. White will be losing the queen in this line. So Magnus knows he needs to do something about that. He challenges the queen's position on b5 right away. This isn't helping. Black has multiple winning lines. You could begin by taking on e3, go like that, and then bishop to g3 check. This, and the rook's going to be coming into the action here. But Richard Rapport decided to begin with queen takes b2, equally crushing. Magnus played rook to d2 and then immediately resigned or ran out of time. I don't know what happened. but the game did not end prematurely. I'll show you how black wins here. Let's say you try something else like queen to d3. I just want to look at this line. This is a mate in 7, beginning with rook takes e3. And if you take, again, the bishop comes in. This is a mate in 2 now with, yeah. So I guess rook to d2 is a little better, although the engine says this is a mate in 9. Starting with, again, rook takes e3, f takes, rook takes check. And let's just look at some options here. Go to d1, that's a mate in 1. You go to f2, that's a mate in 3, beginning with queen takes d2 check. Then the engine's saying put your queen in the way. If you try king to g1, you're going to get mated like this, this, and this. So giving up the queen here is objectively best, I guess, because it's a mate in 7. I'll show you that in a second. Let's look at rook e2, though, because that's a more human thing to try. This runs in the bishop g3 check, king goes to d1, queen to b1 check, king to d2, rook to d3, that's checkmate. Just too much firepower around the white king. The mate in 7, in case you want to see it, I mean, white loses the queen, so it's not really important that there's a mate in 7 because you're going to get mated eventually. But I'll just show you. Black should play queen to b1 check. You block with the rook. Here comes the bishop again. Rook goes here. Now queen to f5 check, king to g2, queen to e4 check, king to g1. Now we finally take the queen on e2. Rook to h2, guarding g2. Bishop takes the rook with check, and then mate comes on the next move. So quite a masterful performance by Richard Rapport, destroying the world's #1 player in 23 moves. Something you don't often see. So thanks for watching. Subscribe to this channel if you enjoy this content, and I will see you very soon.